All right, we're going to talk about Copilot Studio component collections, scalability, and reuse within agents. My name is David Warner. I'm with Warner Digital, and I am an MVP, my self-certified trainer. Love working with everybody in the community, so reach out. All right, so what is our agenda today? Now, some of you may or may not be familiar with component collections, so we're going to talk a little bit about the problems that collections solve. If you're familiar with components, we've seen some examples of that on the previous demos today, obviously. You might already be familiar with some of those properties, such as, like, for example, Power Apps or PCF or SPFX. Maybe you're a multi-talented technologist and using all of these things. Those all have components too. So we'll kind of see how they compare. And then we're going to review the collections, kind of see a quick review of how they work together. And then we're going to talk about multiple collection scalability, along with the fact that Copilot collections or component collections, well, they're a little needy. They're a little clingy. They like to be exclusive with the components. So we're going to kind of see what that looks like, because it might actually be a little gotcha moment. So we want to make sure that you take advantage of that. Okay. So let's dive right in. Oh God. All right. Sorry, everybody. Hold on. Sorry, everybody. Hold up. Boss man's calling in again. Boss man, what's going on? Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So what? Everybody's yelling at you because you're setting up component collections, and they're kind of stealing their components. Yeah. Okay. I get it, right? You don't want anybody mad at you and all that kind of stuff. So listen, I'm going to call with the community right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to look into this and see if we can figure out how to make it work for you. We don't want anybody to hate you. I know you're a sensitive guy. Why are you dressing up again? I don't. Well, okay. Let's come back to that. Just give me a call back in a couple minutes. All right. We'll get this solved. We'll figure it out, and we'll find a solution for it. Yeah, okay. Thanks, guy. See you soon. Okay, so listen, what's the problem that the boss man is talking about, right? What is the problem that component collection solves? It rebuilds the same logic over and over and over when we don't use them, right? So you're going to get a bunch of people creating things, and maybe they're the same things. So one of us comes in, and we create an HR agent, and we create a contact topic. And then another person creates an IT agent, and then a contact topic. And then a finance agent and a contact topic, right? And that is annoying. So what is a component collection and how can it help? Essentially, it is the opportunity to reuse and create a reusable package of component collections shared across agents. And you don't even need to manually add them into the agents. So there's a little bit of landscape awareness, though, that you need to have because they work a little differently. Now, if you're familiar with some of the other components that are part of the Microsoft ecosystem, for example, when you create an SPFX or SharePoint Framework library component, you create that component. And then the web part or the extension or whatever solution you're using imports that library component. Seems like a natural progression. Or hey, Power Apps component libraries. Inside of that, or a PCF control, as Grayson had shown, we create those components, right, and the functionality, and then we import them into our Power App. It's a little different when we work with Copilot collection or component collections, because what you do is you first create the Copilot agent component, right? Maybe that's a topic, as we see in this example. And then the component collection imports that agent and then also inherits that component. So in this case, it would be that topic. So while we're used to maybe creating all of the functionality of the component first and then importing it into our agent, it's actually kind of the other way around. It's like a chicken and an egg scenario, right? So how does it look when you create it all together? We would go in and we would create, for example, our HR agent. We would create a contact topic. Then we would create a component collection, and that component collection could then inherit and become part of the HR agent, the IT agent, and the finance agent. And then all of those would inherit that individual contact topic that we see right here automatically. So we wouldn't have to worry about recreating it. They would all be tied together in the same way, and it would be working consistent. Okay, so how does that functionally work, though? Let's go through a quick review of what that looks like. So I'm going to bring you over here into Copilot Studio. Now, I've got a few just basic agents here set up for a variety of things. We have things like our travel agent and our IT agent, and those are the two we're going to focus on today, right? They're basic. The functionality of them doesn't matter. All we're going to showcase is exactly how they can work with a component collection. Now, by and large, Microsoft gives us a variety of ways to accomplish things and access things, right? So if you've never accessed component collections, you can get to them from here and access the component collections there. We're going to be able to see how we can get in and around and maneuver around Copilot Studio here in a variety of ways. But first thing is this. Let's go into our travel agent and let's look to see what it's got. It's got a couple of topics that are custom. Right, so I've got a couple of topics that are custom here. One is a Warner Digital follow-up, and one is a Warner Digital trip planner. Now, those might be things that we want other agents to use, right? So just from a practicality and logistic perspective, let's see how we can associate these topics which live in our travel agent, Department of Redundancy department, right? Our travel agent is using these, but it's exclusive right now. So what could we do? So I'm going to come over to my component collection. And again, there's a variety of ways you can access it. You could also go to settings and get there. But I'm going to come over to my component collections. And for just purposes of brevity, I'm not going to show how to create a brand new component collection. It's very simple if you fill in a name, a description, and associate it to a solution. But I've already created a couple, right? Just to be able to showcase. So I've got Components Toolkit and I've got Boss Man Toolkit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the Components Toolkit. And you can edit some properties of it, like its name, its description, the solution it's associated to, and you can connect it to agents. Now, you'll notice down here on the bottom, it says add components, right? That's all grayed out because there's no agents connected here yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to add an agent. Now, the one that we want to add is travel agent. Right? Because those are those topics, and you could use a variety of other things, but I'm going to just simply use those topics. What they do doesn't matter, right? They're a component that we want to take advantage of. We're just looking at how all of this is organized for now. So I'm going to click on Travel Agent. I'm going to click Add. And then what it's going to do is it's going to essentially associate that agent to my component collection. So we see it show up here now up in Connected Agents, and there's been no components added, but you'll notice that the button is now lit up. I can add from an agent. And by the way, to get around, I could also click on the little agent here to go to that agent. We'll see what that looks like in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to click on my travel agent. It's the only agent I have associated to my component collection. And I'm going to click Next. And we see all of the different things that are associated with this agent, which are mostly all just topics right now. So I'm just going to limit it to WD. Those are the ones that I have created that are custom. I'm only going to add the follow-up for now. Okay, so I'm going to add the follow-up. I'm going to hit Next. I'm going to select the follow-up component here, or control, I should say, and I'm going to add it into my Components Toolkit component collection. Now, once it gets added, it's not removing it from the agent. It's just taking ownership of it, if you will, right? It is now belonging to my component collection here within my Components Toolkit. And how can we confirm that? Well, I'm going to click on my travel agent link right here instead of going all the way back through agents and all that. It's a little shortcut, right? I can just click on that. It takes me directly into my agent. I'm going to go back to topics. And now I'm going to see that I've got my follow-up is still there, but there's a little icon here that shows that it is connected to a component collection. When I hover over that, it says this component is coming from a component collection. Cool. I could even click on that to go back to it, right? But first, what I'm going to do is now that I've added that component to my component collection, I want to now include it into another agent. So just to show that there's nothing hidden up that sleeve, nothing hidden up this sleeve, I'm going to go to my IT agent. I'm going to go to topics. And we're going to see that there's no custom things going on here, right? I've just got the basic out-of-the-box topics. So when I go back to my component collection and I come into my Components Toolkit, I'm going to add that agent. Now, I'm not going to do anything other than adding the IT agent. I'm just simply going to add it to this component collection. I didn't tell it to, hey, by the way, also go in and add the follow-up to it. That is the purpose of the component collection. So now when I click on IT agent to go back to that, and I go over to topics, I can see that that automatically inherited it. It is now part of that package, right? And I could even click on this link to go back in here. I see they're both there. If I go back to component collections, I can also, from this view, see what agents it's associated to. So now, anytime changes are made to that particular topic, whether it be in the IT agent or the travel agent, they're all going to inherit it, which underscores the importance of a management lifecycle, right? Great power comes great responsibility. So we want to make sure that this is not just willy-nilly employed where everybody is overriding each other's agents like the boss man was doing, right? But there's even more that goes on that we need to know from a management perspective. Okay, so let's come back to our slides. And let's understand that we can also have multiple collections which can connect to multiple agents. So what I mean by this is that agent and agent controls can belong to multiple collections. So when we go back to our travel agent in a moment, remember that had two topics. We included one with the components collection, right? But it had another topic which I'm now going to include to the boss man, because we're going to see how you can absolutely have things inside of your agents that are deriving from multiple component collections. Okay, so let's come back and take a look to see what that looks like. It's not that hard to figure out. In fact, you probably already know. What we do is we just come into now our boss man toolkit. Okay, I'm going to come into my boss man toolkit that has no connected agents at all. I'm going to click on add agent. I'm going to come back to my travel agent and I'm going to click add. Okay, now that that's added there, let me go back to just the roll up here and show you. I now have my travel agent associated to the components toolkit and the boss man toolkit, but I've not added any components actually into the boss man toolkit yet. So if I go back over to my travel agent, which that's a clickable entity, right? So it's nice to be able to navigate. I still see that the follow-up is associated to a component collection. I click on it, takes me back to the components toolkit. Okay, great. Just making sure, double checking, right? And now I go back into the boss man toolkit. Now I want to add that component. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go to travel agent. I'm going to go filter on WD. We added the follow-up. Now I'm going to add the trip planner. Okay, so I'm going to select trip planner. I'm going to confirm. I'm going to add it here. Okay, and now it's going to become the trip planner topic is now belonging to the boss man toolkit, right? So if I go back into my travel agent, and if you're like, oh my God, who's on first, what's on second? You're absolutely right. That's why management, documentation, organization matters here. This is super, super cool and super powerful, but you want to just make sure you're doing it in a very organized way to ensure that the power behind it is not corrupting or causing trouble that the boss man experienced, right? So when I come over to topics now, I do see I've got both of my custom ones there, and I've got both of them belonging to a component collection. What's a little bit hard is it is hard to see which component collection these belong to from this view. I will admit that'd be great if we could hover and see which one belongs to, right? We just added trip planner, and when I click on that, it takes me into the boss man toolkit because that's the one we know. We know it by heart, right? We just did it. So what that showcases is that our travel agent components, or the topics within travel agent components, now belong to two different agents, or excuse me, component collections, right? And then that's cool. There might be different reasons we have different entities or components within our agents that are managed by different teams. So we've got that capability of being able to do that, which I think is super powerful. It allows you to kind of organize yourself into teams for ensuring consistency and scalability, and not one person has to manage everything. But be careful, because guess what? Great power comes great responsibility. Multiple collections require individual agent controls. So what does that mean? It means the component collections are exclusive. They are very, very selfish. Individual agent controls cannot belong to multiple collections. And in fact, it won't even tell you that it happens if you were to move it. Right? So what does that look like? Let's wrap the demo up and show you the last piece here that you want to be aware of. What we've got here is we've got two topics that are included in two different component collections, right? Our trip planner is part of the boss man, okay? Trip planner is part of the boss man toolkit, and our follow-up topic is part of the components toolkit, right? So what happens if the boss man comes in here and says, cool, I've got a travel agent and that's got a follow-up topic, by the way, that was part of both our IT agent and our travel agent. Okay, follow-up topic here, travel agent, IT agent. So the boss man in his typical fashion comes in and goes, well, I love that topic. I am now going to add it from my travel agent. I'm going to come in here and we'll see that if I filter on WD, well, trip planner's grayed out because that's already there, right? But hey, cool, I can select follow-up. Let me do that. I'm going to click next and I'm going to add it to my collection. Boss man, he's selfish too, right? So he wants it to be part of his toolkit. So now it's there. And if I come back into my travel agent, we added the follow-up. I come back into my travel agent. I go to topics. I see they're both there. If I click on the follow-up link to go, takes me back into the boss man toolkit. Okay, that's all looking good. Let's come into our components toolkit and it's all gone, right? And if I go back into my IT agent where it was part of, this will eventually go away, right? This is going to, usually there's a little bit of a delay. If I refresh and just kind of force a refresh, you'll see it disappear, right? It's going to be Gonski in just a second. There you go. It would eventually just remove itself. So you got to be aware of the exclusivity of our requirements when we use these component collections. They are super, super powerful. But imagine if this IT agent was now dependent on that topic or some other tool or something else. Well, guess what? We just bamboozled it. We just removed it from it because we moved the component into another component collection, which then removed it from this other agent. So there's a lot of keep your eye on the queen. 10 will get you 20, right? It's a little bit of a shell game, which is why it means that you need to keep track of all the lifecycle management of these things. I absolutely love them. They're super, super powerful, but you do need to be aware because if you're just unaware, it can cause problems. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can. Oh, perfect timing. All right. Let's get the boss man calling in. Boss man, what's up? What do you got going on? All right, yeah. So now you know that you're not just copying. Maybe if you need to create some independent collections, you might need to export some of those features or maybe use the YAML to copy, which is a opportunity. So yeah, no one's going to hate you anymore. I get it. Yep, no problem. Okay, so how you feeling? Yep, I get it. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad we were able to solve it for you. Now you know how it's working. And no, I don't think people are going to start saluting you and calling you captain, right? So I will say you're a major pain in the, okay, you know what? That's it. All right, let's go ahead and see what's going on. So what are some other things that you can keep track of on component collections? They have dependencies. You have to be aware of those. You can set them up as a primary agent. So you can define an agent that is exclusive to just a single component collection. Right. And so, yes, as mentioned in the chat, someone had mentioned, Daniel, you confused what happened. It is a little confusing. And that's what happened to me when I first figured out. Essentially, one component collection stole from another component collection. It didn't copy. It didn't share. It stole it. It moved it. And you wouldn't even know it's happening. Right. So you want to be aware of that. Okay, so take a look at aka.ms/cpscc component studio Copilot Studio component collections. We'll give you access to the documentation that's going on there.